The sun shone brightly over Central Plaza, a lively city square surrounded by cafes, flower stands, and an array of bustling weekend shoppers. The place had a pulse of its own, children laughing as they played near the fountain, couples strolling hand in hand, and workers enjoying their coffee breaks. Among them was Jacob Myers, a middle-aged man in his late 50s, a retired teacher who valued the quiet moments of reflection that the plaza offered. Dressed in a simple blue jacket, worn jeans, and sneakers, Jacob took a slow sip from his steaming coffee cup. A red baseball hat, embroidered with bold white letters, sat snugly on his head. "Make America Great Again." For Jacob, the hat was less about making a statement and more about symbolizing his belief in civic responsibility and pride. He had seen the debates and controversies surrounding the MAGA logo, but his choice to wear it wasn't rooted in malice, it was just a small part of his identity. Across the plaza, the mood was about to shift. Karen Peterson, a local activist in her early 40s, was standing at a food truck, scrolling through her phone while waiting for her chai latte. Karen had been known for her outspoken nature, often leading protests and engaging in heated online debates. Her energy could electrify a room or polarize it. Her eyes flickered upward, catching sight of Jacob's hat. Karen's expression darkened instantly. The sight of those 4 words emblazoned in bold white on a red canvas ignited a wave of indignation. To her, that hat symbolized division, oppression, and everything she was fighting against. Her mind raced as she fixated on Jacob, sitting there with such ease, as if his choice of attire wasn't an affront to countless people. Karen's grip on her latte tightened as she muttered to herself, "Unbelievable. People like that think they can just flaunt it." Without finishing her drink, Karen marched across the plaza, her strides purposeful and charged. Nearby, a street guitarist faltered mid-chord as Karen brushed past him, her expression enough to send ripples through the peaceful ambiance. Passers-by sensed her storm-like demeanor, giving her a wide berth as she zeroed in on Jacob. Jacob noticed her before she spoke. He looked up from his coffee, blinking in surprise as Karen stopped a few feet away, arms crossed and brows furrowed. "Excuse me," she started, her voice sharp enough to cut through the soft hum of the plaza. "Do you think it's appropriate to wear that here?" Jacob's calm demeanor didn't waver. "I'm sorry?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. Karen jabbed a finger toward his cap. "That hat. Do you even know what that represents? Or do you just enjoy antagonizing people in public?" Jacob's initial confusion turned to quiet understanding. He realized what this was about. "Ma'am, I'm just enjoying my coffee. I'm not here to cause trouble," he replied, keeping his tone measured. He wasn't a stranger to disagreements, but this felt more personal. Karen wasn't having it. "Not here to cause trouble," she repeated, her voice rising. "That hat is trouble. It's a symbol of hate. People like you think you can wear it and not face any consequences." By now, a small crowd had started to form. Curious onlookers pretended to browse the nearby stalls, their ears tuned to the escalating exchange. "I'm sorry you feel that way," Jacob said, glancing around at the gathering bystanders. "But I'm not going to argue with you. I believe everyone has a right to express themselves." "Express yourselves?" Karen shot back, her face flushing with anger. "You call this expression? It's provocation, plain and simple." Karen's voice carried across the plaza, drawing more attention. Jacob remained seated, his calmness contrasting with Karen's heated stance. "Look," he said gently, "you have your beliefs and I have mine. Let's agree to disagree." But Karen was past the point of reasoning. To her, Jacob's calmness felt like an insult, a dismissal of the very real pain she associated with his hat. Her chest tightened, her breath quickened, and she felt her emotions boiling over. Then, almost without thinking, she reached into her purse. Her fingers closed around the small canister of pepper spray she carried for self-defense. In her mind, she convinced herself that this was necessary, that Jacob's very presence was a threat to everything she stood for. "You think you can just sit there and intimidate people?" Karen yelled, her voice trembling. "Not on my watch." Before Jacob could react, Karen raised the pepper spray and pressed the nozzle. A burst of orange mist sprayed directly into Jacob's face. He cried out in pain, dropping his coffee as he stumbled off the bench, his hands flying to his burning eyes. The crowd gasped collectively, some rushing forward to help, while others pulled out their phones to record the shocking scene. "Oh my God," someone shouted. Chaos erupted in the plaza. Bystanders scrambled to aid Jacob, handing him water and tissues as he struggled to flush out the stinging spray. Meanwhile, Karen stood frozen, the pepper spray still clutched in her hand. For a brief moment, she felt a twisted sense of vindication. But as she looked around, the horrified faces of the crowd began to sink in. People whispered furiously, shaking their heads in disbelief. "What the hell is wrong with her?" one man said. Another woman pulled out her phone and dialed 911 on her journey. "Yes, we need the police," she said, her voice urgent. "Someone just attacked a man with pepper spray." Karen's sense of righteousness quickly gave way to dread. Her breathing quickened as the weight of her actions hit her. She stammered, "I felt threatened. He was being aggressive." But her excuses fell flat. The witnesses had seen everything, and no one was buying her story. Minutes later, the sound of sirens pierced the tense atmosphere. 2 police cars pulled up at the edge of the plaza, and officers stepped out, scanning the scene. One of them, Officer Daniels, a tall woman with a commanding presence, approached Karen. "Ma'am, put the pepper spray down," Officer Daniels said firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. Karen hesitated, her hands trembling. He provoked me," she insisted weakly. "We have witnesses and video evidence that say otherwise," Officer Daniels replied, taking a step closer. "Put it down and step over here." Karen's face went pale as she realized the gravity of her situation. Slowly, she placed the pepper spray on the ground and allowed the officers to guide her away from the crowd. Meanwhile, Jacob sat on the bench, his face red and swollen, tears streaming as he tried to soothe the burning in his eyes. A kind bystander knelt beside him, offering a bottle of water. "Why?" Jacob managed to say, his voice hoarse. "Why did she do this?" Officer Daniels knelt next to him. "Sir, I'm Officer Daniels. We're here to help. Do you need medical attention?" Jacob shook his head, wincing. "I'll be okay. I just need a moment." "We'll take your statement when you're ready," Daniels assured him. "Take your time." As the officers separated Karen and Jacob, the plaza slowly began to return to normal, though the air remained thick with tension. Onlookers whispered among themselves, their expressions a mix of shock and disapproval. It was clear to everyone that Karen had crossed a line, and now she was going to face the consequences. The months following the incident at the plaza transformed the community in ways no one had anticipated. While Karen worked to rebuild her life, a ripple effect from the confrontation began to emerge, sparking deeper questions about justice, forgiveness, and the human capacity for change. Karen's efforts at the community center became more than just a way to make amends. Slowly, she began to discover new aspects of herself. One day, while volunteering with a group of middle school students, a young girl named Mia tugged at her sleeve. "Miss Karen, do you think people can really change?" Mia asked, her big questioning eyes filled with doubt. The question gave Karen pause. How could she answer this? She had been grappling with that same thought for months. Karen knelt to Mia's level and took a deep breath. "I think people can change," she said softly. "But it takes hard work, honesty, and a lot of courage to face your mistakes. It's not easy, but it's possible." Mia nodded solemnly, as if weighing Karen's answer. Later, Karen learned that Mia had been struggling with her own feelings of anger and isolation after being bullied at school. The conversation planted the seed for a new program at the community center, one focused on teaching conflict resolution and emotional awareness to young people. Karen poured her energy into the project, drawing from her own experiences and the lessons she had learned. Meanwhile, Jacob found himself unexpectedly becoming a symbol for the local community. People he had never met before would approach him on the street to offer words of encouragement, thanking him for his composure during the incident. At first, it was overwhelming. Jacob wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and he struggled to understand why people looked up to him. During one of the many community forums inspired by the Plaza confrontation, Jacob was invited to share his perspective. Standing before a packed auditorium, he adjusted the microphone and cleared his throat. "I'm not a hero," he began, his voice steady but humble. I'm just a person who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. What happened to me could have happened to anyone." He paused, scanning the room. "But what I've realized is that how we respond to conflict defines us. It's easy to react with anger or resentment, but that doesn't solve anything. What I needed, was understanding." Jacob's words struck a chord, and the room erupted in applause. His speech was later shared on social media, further amplifying his message of resilience and empathy. It also led to unexpected opportunities, including invitations to speak at schools and events about fostering tolerance and handling conflict peacefully. Despite the progress, not everyone was willing to let go of the divisions the incident had exposed. Some members of the community continued to argue over whether Karen deserved redemption. Online debates flared up periodically, with people rehashing the details of the plaza confrontation and questioning whether Karen's efforts were genuine or merely performative. This tension came to a head during a town hall meeting, where residents were invited to share their thoughts about how the community could move forward. The room was filled with a mix of optimism and skepticism, and the discussion quickly grew heated. "I don't see why we're celebrating her so-called progress," one man said, his voice tinged with anger. "She attacked someone. That's not something you can just apologize for and move on." A woman in the back of the room stood up, her expression calm but resolute. "But isn't that the point? If we don't allow people the chance to change, then what kind of community are we? Redemption isn't about forgetting what happened, it's about learning from it." The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, some shouting in agreement and others shaking their heads in frustration. The town hall highlighted just how much work the community still had to do to heal. Karen's transformation caught the attention of someone she never expected, her former boss, Sarah, who had fired her after the incident went viral. Sarah had been following Karen's journey from afar, impressed by the changes she had made. One day, Sarah reached out with an unexpected offer. "Karen," she said during a phone call, "I've seen the work you've been doing, and I think it's time we had a conversation. Would you like to meet?" Karen hesitated but ultimately agreed. They met at a quiet cafe, and the atmosphere was tense at first. Sarah wasted no time getting to the point. "I'll be honest," Sarah began. "When I let you go, I didn't think you'd recover from this. But you've proven me wrong. I can see how much effort you've put into turning your life around, and I respect that." Karen was stunned. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded. "I'm not saying we can undo the past, but if you're interested, I'd like to offer you a position in our new community outreach program. It's part-time for now, but I think you'd be a good fit." Karen felt a mix of relief and gratitude. It was a small step, but it was the first time she felt like she was being given a second chance professionally. While Karen was finding her footing, Jacob's daughter Emily took an interest in the ongoing community discussions. As a college student studying sociology, Emily saw the plaza incident as a real-world example of the theories she was learning in class. She asked Jacob if she could interview him for a research project she was working on about restorative justice. During their conversation, Jacob shared his thoughts on forgiveness and accountability. "It's not about erasing what happened," he told Emily. "It's about finding a way to move forward without letting the pain define you." Emily's project eventually became the basis for a campus-wide event on conflict resolution, where she invited Karen to speak alongside her father. The event marked the first time the two shared a stage, and their joint appearance was both emotional and inspiring. For Karen, it was an opportunity to show the younger generation that change was possible. For Jacob, it was a chance to see his daughter carry forward the lessons he had learned. Months turned into a year, and the plaza incident began to fade from the forefront of people's minds. But its impact lingered in quieter, more profound ways. The community was more engaged than ever, with new programs and initiatives aimed at fostering empathy and understanding. Karen continued her work at the community center and took on a part-time role with Sarah's company, using her experiences to help others navigate conflict. Jacob, though still cautious, found himself feeling a sense of closure he hadn't thought possible. One day, as Karen was leaving the community center, she saw Jacob sitting on a bench near the fountain. She hesitated for a moment before walking over. "Jacob," she said, her voice tentative, "I just wanted to say thank you. for giving me a chance to prove that I could be better." Jacob looked up at her and gave a small nod. "You've come a long way, Karen. I think we both have." They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of the fountain mingling with the distant hum of the city. It wasn't a perfect ending, life rarely is, but it was a hopeful one, and sometimes hope is enough to keep moving forward. The weeks unfolded with a rhythm of cautious progress, each day bringing subtle changes and opportunities for growth. Karen's life had settled into a routine that, while unremarkable on the surface, carried deep significance. Her mornings were spent at the community center, where her program for young people gained traction. Afternoons were a blend of meetings with Sarah's outreach team and moments of self-reflection, often spent at the local park. One crisp morning, as Karen prepared materials for an upcoming workshop, she noticed Mia lingering near the supply shelf. The girl's usual exuberance was absent, replaced by a quiet hesitation. "Everything okay, Mia?" Karen asked, setting aside the stack of handouts. Mia shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "I guess. It's just, there's this girl at school. She's always picking on me." Karen knelt beside her, her voice gentle but firm. "That's tough. I'm sorry you're going through that. Have you tried talking to someone about it?" Mia shook her head. "I don't think it'll help." Karen thought back to her own struggles with confrontation and how avoiding difficult conversations had often made things worse. Sometimes, standing up for yourself can be scary, but it's important. You don't have to do it alone, though. We can figure out a plan together. Mia's eyes brightened slightly, and Karen felt a surge of determination. She knew that helping Mia navigate this challenge was as much about guiding her as it was about reinforcing her own commitment to change. Later that day, Karen shared the situation with Sarah during a team meeting. "I think we need to address bullying more directly in our workshops," she said. "It's not just about conflict resolution. It's about building confidence and teaching kids how to advocate for themselves." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "That's a great idea. Let's develop a module around it. And Karen, I want you to lead it. You've got the insight and the empathy these kids need." The trust in Sarah's voice was both reassuring and intimidating. Karen threw herself into the task, drawing on her experiences to create a program that resonated with the kids. The first session was a success, with Mia and several other students sharing their stories and learning strategies to address their fears. While Karen focused on the program, Jacob found himself exploring a different kind of connection. One evening, while visiting a local bookstore, he came across a section dedicated to memoirs and personal essays. A particular book caught his eye, The Weight of Forgiveness. Intrigued, he purchased it and spent the next few days engrossed in its pages. The book, written by someone who had faced a similarly life-altering conflict, mirrored many of Jacob's own thoughts and feelings. It provided a framework for understanding his journey and offered practical advice on navigating the complexities of forgiveness. Inspired, Jacob decided to reach out to the author, sending an email to the address listed in the back of the book. To his surprise, the author responded quickly. Their exchange evolved into a series of thoughtful conversations about resilience, reconciliation, and the power of storytelling. Encouraged by this new perspective, Jacob began to consider writing about his own experiences, not for public consumption, but as a way to process his emotions and document his growth. At the same time, Emily noticed the change in her father. His newfound sense of purpose inspired her to delve deeper into her own studies, and she often shared her insights with him. One evening, as they discussed a paper she was working on, Emily asked, "Have you ever thought about turning your story into something more, like a talk or a workshop?" Jacob hesitated. "I don't know. I'm not sure I'm the right person for that." "But you are," Emily insisted. "You've lived it, Dad. People need to hear from someone who's been through it and come out the other side." Jacob wasn't convinced, but Emily's words lingered. Over the next few weeks, he toyed with the idea, jotting down notes and sketching out ideas. The process was both cathartic and challenging, forcing him to confront parts of the experience he had tried to suppress. Meanwhile, the community's focus began to shift toward creating lasting change. Inspired by the conversations and initiatives sparked by the Plaza incident, a group of local leaders proposed a new annual event, the Harmony Festival. The event would celebrate diversity, promote understanding, and provide a platform for people to share their story. Karen was invited to join the planning committee, and she eagerly accepted. The work was demanding, but it gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. As the festival approached, Karen and Jacob found themselves drawn into a whirlwind activity, collaborating on panels and workshops that would anchor the event. The festival's opening day dawned bright and clear, and the plaza was transformed into a vibrant hub of activity. Booths lined the square, showcasing everything from art and music to local cuisine. At the center of it all was a stage, where speakers and performers shared their talents and stories. Karen and Jacob were scheduled to speak during the afternoon session. As they waited backstage, Karen turned to Jacob, her nerves evident. "I'm not sure I can do this," she admitted. Jacob placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You'll be fine. Just speak from the heart." When it was Karen's turn to take the stage, she stepped up to the microphone and scanned the crowd. Her voice trembled at first, but as she began to share her journey, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. "I've made a lot of mistakes in my life," she began. "But what I've learned is that mistakes don't have to define you. What matters is how you choose to move forward." Her words resonated with the audience, and by the time she finished, the applause was deafening. Jacob followed, his speech a heartfelt reflection on resilience and the power of community. Together, their messages set the tone for the rest of the festival, inspiring conversations and connections that would continue long after the event ended. As the day wound down, Karen and Jacob found themselves standing by the fountain, much as they had months earlier. But this time, the tension and uncertainty were gone, replaced by a quiet sense of accomplishment. "We did good today," Karen said, her voice steady. Jacob nodded. "Yeah, we did." For the first time in a long while, they both felt a sense of peace. A reminder that while the road to redemption was never easy, it was always worth traveling. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the plaza, Karen and Jacob found themselves lingering at the festival, even after the official closing ceremony. The hum of quiet conversations and laughter still filled the air, and the scent of roasted chestnuts and fresh pastries lingered. The day had been a resounding success, and yet, for Karen, it felt like only the beginning of something larger. "Are you staying for the cleanup?" Jacob asked, his tone lighthearted, as he gestured toward a group of volunteers stacking chairs and picking up litter. Karen shook her head, smiling. "Not tonight. I think I've earned a break." He chuckled softly. "Fair enough." As they walked toward the edge of the plaza, Karen spotted Mia with her parents. The young girl was beaming, holding up a small trophy she'd won during one of the festival's activities. Karen waved, and Mia ran over, her excitement bubbling over. "Miss Karen, did you see? I won first place in the storytelling contest." Karen crouched to Mia's level, her grin widening. "That's amazing, Mia. I'm so proud of you. What story did you tell?" "It was about the dragon who didn't know how to roar but learned to sing instead," Mia said, her eyes sparkling. "Everyone loved it." "That sounds incredible," Karen said, her chest swelling with pride. "I knew you had it in you." Mia's parents approached, offering Karen warm smiles. "Thank you for everything you've done for her," Mia's mother said. "She's grown so much since she started your program." Karen felt a lump in her throat but managed a humble nod. "She's the one doing the hard work. I'm just here to help her along the way." As Mia and her family walked away, Jacob gave Karen a sidelong glance. "You've made quite an impact here." Karen shrugged, though her cheeks flushed with quiet pride. "It's a team effort." The festival may have been over, but its ripples were just beginning to spread. Over the next few weeks, Karen's workshop saw a surge in attendance, with new faces eager to join the conversations about resilience, self-expression, and standing up for one's values. She introduced new activities from role-playing scenarios to creative writing exercises, each designed to empower the participants and give them tools to navigate their challenges. One afternoon, Karen invited a guest speaker, a local artist named Elena who had overcome significant hardships to achieve success. Elena's story resonated deeply with the group, and after her talk, she lingered to answer questions and offer encouragement. Mia was one of the first to approach her. "How did you know you'd make it?" she asked, her voice tinged with awe. Elena smiled warmly. "I didn't. But I learned that the only way to fail for sure is to stop trying. so I kept going even when it was hard. Karen watched the exchange with a sense of fulfillment. Moments like these reminded her why she had chosen this path and reaffirmed her belief in the power of shared stories. Meanwhile, Jacob was finding his own rhythm. Encouraged by Emily and his conversations with the memoirist, he began hosting small gatherings at the bookstore where people could come together to discuss themes of healing, forgiveness, and personal growth. The sessions started small, but quickly grew in popularity, attracting a diverse group of attendees who found solace in the shared experience. One evening, during a particularly candid discussion, a young man named Luis opened up about his struggles with guilt over a falling out with his estranged father. His voice trembled as he spoke, and Jacob recognized the raw vulnerability in his words. "It feels like no matter what I do, I can't fix what happened," Luis admitted. "I don't even know if he'd want to hear from me." Jacob leaned forward, his tone empathetic. "It's never easy, and there's no guarantee of how someone will respond. But reaching out isn't just for them, it's for you. It's about giving yourself the chance to say what you need to say, whether or not they're ready to hear it." Luis nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. By the end of the session, he approached Jacob to thank him personally. "I think I'm going to try," he said, "even if it's just a letter." Jacob felt a sense of quiet pride as he watched Luis leave, knowing that his own journey had paved the way for moments like this. Back at home, Emily had taken on a new project of her own. Inspired by the Harmony Festival, she started a podcast dedicated to exploring the stories of people in their community. Her goal was to amplify voices that often went unheard, from local activists to artists, educators, and everyday individuals making a difference. Her first guest was Sarah, whose work with the outreach team had become a cornerstone of the community's efforts. The interview delved into Sarah's motivations, challenges, and hopes for the future, painting a vivid picture of her dedication and resilience. Karen listened to the episode with Jacob one evening, both of them marveling at Emily's poise and insight as a host. "She's really found her calling," Karen said, her voice tinged with pride. Jacob nodded. She's always had a way of making people feel seen. I think she gets that from you." Karen glanced at him, surprised by the compliment. "I think she gets it from both of us." As the weeks turned into months, the impact of the Harmony Festival continued to ripple outward. New partnerships formed between local organizations, and the community began to feel more connected than ever. Karen and Jacob were frequently invited to speak at events and panels, their once distant relationship transforming into a partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. One evening, after a particularly long day, Karen found herself sitting on her balcony, gazing out at the city lights. The sound of footsteps behind her made her turn, and she was surprised to see Emily. "Couldn't sleep?" Karen asked, gesturing for her to sit. Emily shook her head, settling into the chair beside her. "I was just thinking about everything that's happened this year, how much has changed." Karen nodded, her gaze distant. "It's been a lot, hasn't it?" Emily smiled softly. "Yeah, but it's been good too. I feel like we're finally moving in the right direction." Karen reached over, squeezing her daughter's hand. "We are, and I'm so proud of you, Emily, for everything you've done." "I'm proud of you too," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the cool night air wrapping around them like a blanket. For the first time in what felt like forever, Karen felt truly at peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because she had found a sense of purpose and connection that made the imperfections bearable. The journey wasn't over, and there would undoubtedly be challenges ahead. But as Karen gazed at the horizon, she felt a quiet confidence that they would face whatever came next together, one step at a time. The following morning, Karen awoke to the gentle sound of rain tapping against her window. The city streets outside gleamed, the moisture catching the early light in a way that made everything feel fresh and renewed. She sipped her coffee slowly, savoring the quiet moment. Yet, in the back of her mind, a thought lingered. An idea that had been taking root ever since the Harmony Festival. She had been approached by a local organization, the Community Futures Initiative, with a proposal to take her workshop beyond the city. They wanted to bring her methods and programs to neighboring towns that lacked the same resources and opportunities. The idea was daunting but exciting. and Karen couldn't shake the feeling that it was the logical next step. Later that day, she sat down with Sarah, her closest confidant on the outreach team, to discuss the proposal. They met at their usual spot, a cozy cafe tucked into a quiet corner of the neighborhood. "This is huge," Sarah said, her enthusiasm bubbling over as she skimmed through the preliminary plans. "You've already built something amazing here. Expanding it could change even more lives." Karen hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup. "It's a big responsibility. What if it's too much? What if I can't keep up?" Sarah set the papers down and leaned forward, her gaze steady. "Karen, you've already done what most people wouldn't even dare to try. You've created something that's making a real difference. If anyone can handle this, it's you." The words settled over Karen like a warm embrace, and for the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility. Maybe she could take the leap. Maybe it was time to think bigger. Meanwhile, Jacob was facing his own crossroads. His bookshop had become a hub of community activity, but he couldn't ignore the financial strain that came with running a small, independent business. He had been approached by a large publishing chain with an offer to buy the shop, and while the money would solve many of his immediate problems, the thought of letting go of what he had built felt like a betrayal of everything he stood for. That evening, he sought advice from Emily. They sat in the living room, the soft glow of a table lamp casting long shadows on the walls. "What would you do?" Jacob asked, his tone laced with uncertainty. "Stick it out and hope for the best? Or take the deal and start over?" Emily frowned, clearly grappling with the weight of the question. "It depends on what matters most to you. The shop isn't just a business, it's a part of who you are. But at the same time, you've always said it's about the people, not the place. Maybe this is a chance to create something new." Her words struck a chord, and Jacob found himself thinking about what the shop had become, a place where stories were shared, connections were made, and healing began. Maybe Emily was right. Maybe it wasn't about the four walls and the shelves of books. Maybe it was about the spirit of the place, something he could carry forward no matter what. As the days passed, both Karen and Jacob found themselves inching closer to their decisions. Karen spent hours poring over the proposal, envisioning what her workshops could look like in new settings. She reached out to mentors and colleagues for advice, each conversation reinforcing her belief that she was ready for the challenge. Jacob, on the other hand, started exploring alternative ways to keep the shop alive without selling. He began hosting larger events, including a monthly open mic night that brought in new customers and fostered a sense of community. He also partnered with local authors to create exclusive book bundles, offering something unique that the big chains couldn't replicate. One rainy Saturday afternoon, Karen and Jacob found themselves at the same cafe where Karen had met with Sarah. They had both been so busy lately that moments like this had become rare, and they savored the chance to catch up. "How's the proposal coming along?" Jacob asked, sipping his coffee. Karen smiled, though there was a hint of nervousness in her expression. "I think I'm going to do it. It's terrifying, but it feels right." Jacob nodded, his admiration evident. "You've got this. I know you do." "And what about you?" Karen asked, tilting her head. "Any closer to a decision about the shop?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "I'm leaning toward keeping it. I've started trying some new things and it's been going well. It's a risk, but I think it's worth taking." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the rain pattering against the windows. It struck Karen how much had changed between them, not just in their individual lives, but in their relationship. They had gone from strained co-parents to partners in a shared journey, each supporting the other in ways they never had before. As they parted ways, both Karen and Jacob felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were stepping into uncharted territory, but they were doing so with a confidence born of experience and resilience. In the weeks that followed, Karen began laying the groundwork for the expansion of her workshops. She assembled a small team, including Sarah, to help with logistics and outreach. Together, they visited neighboring towns, meeting with community leaders, and gathering insights about the unique challenges each area faced. Jacob, meanwhile, launched a crowdfunding campaign to support the bookshop, highlighting its role as a community hub. The response was overwhelming, with messages of support pouring in from customers, local authors, and even strangers who had heard about his efforts. The funds raised not only kept the shop afloat, but allowed him to make much-needed improvements, including adding a dedicated space for events and workshops. Emily, inspired by her parents' determination, threw herself into her podcast with renewed vigor. She began incorporating live interviews and Q&A sessions, drawing in a wider audience and sparking meaningful conversations about resilience, community, and personal growth. By the end of the year, the ripple effects of their efforts were undeniable. Karen's workshops were thriving in multiple towns, Jacob's bookshop had become a beacon of hope for small businesses, and Emily's podcast was gaining traction as a powerful platform for change. As the three of them gathered for a quiet dinner one evening, Karen looked around the table and felt a profound sense of gratitude. The path they had traveled hadn't been easy, and the road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges. But they had found their way through the darkness, guided by a shared commitment to growth, connection, and the belief that change was always possible. And in that moment, surrounded by the people who mattered most, Karen knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. Loved this story? Click the next video for more, and make sure to subscribe so you never miss our latest uploads.